New Year's Echo. December 31st, 10:47 p.m. Through the studio window, the city lights stretched out like a faint glow. Fireworks tests disappearing between tall buildings exploded like muffled spots in the fog, then vanished. When the radio's on-air light turned red, Mark Lewis took a deep breath. "Sleepless City is back," he said, bringing the microphone a little closer to his lips. "On the last night of the year, we're here again for those who are alone. I'm Mark Lewis. If you don't want to be alone, our line is open. Today, we're going to do something special. The scariest New Year's Eve memories. If you manage to scare me, you get to choose the next song after the commercials." Ryan, the young technician sitting in the glass booth next to the studio, raised his thumb and made a thumbs-up gesture. Then he took off his headphones and called out, "15 minutes, then I'm out of here, Mark! My family will kill me if I don't!" Mark looked up at the ceiling for a moment. "Sure," he said. He had intended to make a joke with that sentence, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. Ryan shrugged, grabbed his coat, and disappeared through the side door. A few seconds later, the sound of the hallway door closing mingled with the building's fading echo. Now, only the hum of the air conditioner, the whir of computer fans, and a faint shadow of city noise remained in the studio. Mark adjusted his headphones. The cheerful buzz of the street came from outside. But this place was like an aquarium, trapped between glass and soundproofing. All that excitement was deliberately hidden from him. Fine, he thought. The fewer people, the fewer masks. He looked at the phone line panel. There were no open calls yet. It was 10:49 p.m. In front of him was the list of songs he would play throughout the night, the times of the commercial breaks, and, as always, an emergency procedure file that no one ever read. On the far right was a red folder. Written on it in black pen was a single word: Miller. Jake Miller. 7 years ago, the man who sat next to him in this studio, his former co-host, his closest friend. On New Year's Eve, he had stepped out for a cigarette break in the middle of the broadcast and never returned. The glass ceiling 2 floors below the studio had been found shattered in the first light of morning. An unfortunate accident, the reports had said. But Mark couldn't stand the word unfortunate since that night. They had argued that night. He had said harsh, hurtful things. "I can do it without you," he had said. The police had looked at the security cameras, shook their heads, and closed the case. But there was one thing Mark had never done: open that red folder and look inside. His fingers hovered over the edge of the file for a moment, then withdrew. He didn't want to hear his own voice in his headphones. He turned off the microphone and leaned back in his chair. In the left corner of the console, there was a small post-it note. Ryan had written it before leaving. "The Happy New Year spot automatically airs at midnight. Don't mess with the system, Mark. Please." He thought about crumpling up the little yellow piece of paper, but decided against it. Ryan was right. Management didn't want anything unexpected to happen during the live broadcast. "We can't handle another surprise this year," they had said. On the night of December 31st, the previous year, at exactly midnight, the station had gone dark for a brief moment, and there had been a few seconds of interruption in the broadcast. The backup generator had kicked in, and no one could fully explain why. After those few seconds of silence, a strange file had appeared in the emergency recording system. It contained only the date, time, and a single word: echo. Mark had opened the file once, but he had thrown his headphones away before he could listen to the humming sound coming from it. He didn't dare listen to it with his bare ears either. He had wanted to delete it from the system, but when he realized he couldn't bring himself to do it, he left it as it was. The time was 10:52 p.m. A light flashed on the phone panel. Mark reflexively pressed the button. "Sleepless City," he said. "It's New Year's Eve. This is Mark. Who am I speaking to?" A slightly fragile male voice came from the other end. "I'm David. I've been listening to your program for years. I have a New Year's Eve story, but—" A few ordinary calls in the first half hour of the night calmed Mark a little. A woman recounted the New Year's Eve she got stuck in the stairwell of her apartment building as a child. Someone else recounted the evening they got lost in the woods. Calm, familiar urban legends. These normal human voices briefly distracted Mark from his own thoughts. But every time the phone hung up, the studio's silence returned. At 11:38 p.m., Mark realized his throat was dry. The coffee in his mug had long since gone cold. He entered the last commercial break and pressed the button. The jingle played, then the automated commercials began. In this 3-minute gap, he slightly opened the studio's glass door and looked into the hallway. The lights were dim. The reception area was empty, the newsroom dark. The entire building, like a giant shell, was preparing to echo his voice inside. He returned to the studio. Before putting on his headphones, he glanced at the digital clock on the wall. 11:41 p.m. There was less than a minute left before the commercials ended. A small LED light on the console suddenly flickered. On the phone panel, one of the lines started ringing before the commercials had even finished. Mark frowned. "That was fast," he muttered. Normally, listeners would start calling after the commercials ended. Such a timely call meant it was either a core listener who knew the station's number well, or someone had been waiting specifically for this minute. As soon as the last sentence of the commercial ended, the jingle returned. Mark turned on the microphone. "Yes, we're back. As we approach the last minutes of the year, Sleepless City is live. We seem to have someone on the line. Hello, who are we speaking to?" There was a moment of silence. Then, a thin but determined female voice was heard. The voice sounded slightly metallic, as if it were coming from a tape, as if it had taken a slightly longer route through the phone line. "Don't hang up," said the woman. Mark smiled slightly. "Why? Are you going to tell me such a terrible story?" "No," said the voice, "because this year, you still have a chance to live." Mark reflexively glanced at the clock. 11:42 p.m. "Nice start," he said. "Name?" "Emily," said the woman. Emily Clark. Mark picked up a pen to write the name on a notepad. At that moment, Emily's voice came again. "You already wrote it. In the bottom right corner. You shortened it to Emily C. You'll write the rest of your last name in a moment, because you always do that." The pen hung between Mark's fingers. His eyes drifted to the little note he had written. Emily C. The pen in his hand trembled, as if guided by someone else. Nonsense, he thought. A coincidence. A guess. Random. Emily continued talking. Please just listen for now. This time it's shorter. You procrastinate too much in the past. You keep joking around and distracting from the topic. Don't do that this year. Mark tried to smile professionally. Emily, how many years have you been listening to the program? Since your last broadcast, said the woman. Since your last one. Mark's expression hardened. My last one? Emily took a deep breath. Her voice trembled for a moment. Today is December 31st, 2030, Mark. It's been 5 years since your last New Year's broadcast. Tonight, while listening to the recordings of that broadcast, we kept getting stuck at the same point over and over again. Me and the others. Then someone said, maybe the signal can bounce back. Mark's heart began to beat so fast you could hear it through his headphones. Reflex, nonsense, prank, someone messing around, a comedian, an amateur voice artist, Ryan's friends. But I heard the voice, he thought. This doesn't sound like lines made up by a bad actor. So, said Mark, are you in the future right now? Emily answered without hesitation. In your future. There's a different fireworks display over the city. Your building is destroyed. Only your recording of that night remains. People open it when the new year approaches. You're in it. Up to a point. Then silence. And silence. Mark bit his lip involuntarily. He looked at the city through the studio window. Dark silhouettes, the same, ordinary. A few early fireworks in the sky. None of them had exploded yet. Okay, he said. Let's say you're right. Then what do you want? Emily's voice was clearer this time. That night, at exactly midnight, you die here. This is the reality we know. This conversation is also on that recording. But we don't know how many times we spoke before that. The signal gets a little worse each time. We begged, we shouted, we tried to explain. You either thought it was a joke or... Or? Mark asked. Or you had already made up your mind, Emily said. Please listen this time. You can survive this broadcast. Mark's eyebrow twitched. I have no plans to kill myself, he said. If you're a paranoid fan... Emily cut him off. The left drawer of the desk, she said. What's in it, Mark? Mark's hand went to the narrow drawer on the left side of the desk. He hadn't opened that drawer in years. Suddenly, he remembered what was inside. 7 years ago, a few weeks after Jake died. After midnight, he had stayed alone in the studio, listening to the dark corridors. That day, that argument, Jake's face, the broken glass. That night, for the first time, he had picked up a gun. An old police friend had given it to him, saying, "You'll need it someday." And he had kept it, then thought he had forgotten it existed. He had loaded it once, then he had put it in the drawer. "Let it stay here," he had said. He hadn't opened it again that night. His heart raced. "How do you know?" he began. "You never answered that question in the past," Emily said. Every time you cut yourself off and went to a commercial break. "Don't joke around, Emily," you said. Then, at 11:58 p.m., you left the live broadcast and opened the drawer. "Don't do that this time." Mark quickly pulled his fingers back from the drawer as if it were hot. "How do you know that?" Emily's voice faded away for a moment, then came back. The static that interrupted it seemed to carry the echoes of other conversations, other Marks. "Because every New Year's Eve, we listen to that recording again," she said. "At a certain point, you stop talking. Nothing can be heard from outside. Just a few seconds of very heavy breathing. Then a click. Then, we know, Mark. We know the autopsy reports, the old news archives, what the listeners said." Mark's stomach began to churn. He wanted to loosen his jacket collar, but his fingers trembled clumsily. "You said your name was Emily," he said. "You said your last name too. Clark. That name doesn't mean anything to me." There was a brief hesitation in Emily's voice. Then the words poured out, as if forced from her throat. "Do you remember Sarah?" Mark's heart stopped for a moment. Sarah, his ex-wife. "You never used that name on the air," Emily said. "You always said, 'my ex-wife.' But we can find everything on the internet, Mark. Divorce records, old newspapers. Sarah Clark." She took back her maiden name. "That surname is my surname too." Mark's throat went dry. What do you mean?" Emily took a deep breath. Was she sitting in a studio? In a room? Or was she really talking from a floor of a building that no longer existed, reduced to rubble? Mark didn't know, but he could feel the weight in her voice. "I'm Emily Grace Clark," she said. "I'm 21 years old. I live in the year 2030. My mother is Sarah Clark. My father is you." For a moment, there was no sound from the studio. Only the hum of the air conditioner, distant sirens, a muffled explosion from the city. Then Mark heard his own voice. It was as if someone else was speaking. I don't have a child." Emily's voice softened. "I was there," he said. "I was there, as much as I could be. But when you died in 2025, I hadn't been born yet. My mother kept every record about you for years. Finally, she found that last broadcast. Every New Year's Eve, she played that recording. I listened to that voice over and over. That voice, your voice. I wanted to change the ending." Mark's thoughts became jumbled. The concept of time slipped through his fingers like water. A voice saying it came from a future that never happened was telling him about a life that didn't exist. But the details of this supposed life were sharp and convincing. "Impossible," he said. "If I hadn't died that night, someone like you would never have been born." Emily smiled slightly, but there was no amusement or lightness in that smile. "I wasn't born anyway," she said. "That's why I'm searching. I'm just a possibility. A possibility that lives in my mother's mind, in your voice, and in this recording. Maybe this search is only in your head. I don't know. All I know is this. If you don't open the drawer this time, the world will change. Even the possibility of my existence will change. But you will live. Mark involuntarily looked around the studio. The old posters on the walls seemed a little paler. The clock read 11:51 p.m. Time was rapidly slipping away with their conversation. He cleared his throat, trying to return to his professional tone. Let's say I believe you, Emily. Tell me what to do. Emily's voice suddenly became livelier, as if she were in a hurry. 2 things, she said. 1. In a moment, at 11:55 p.m., the system will automatically insert an ad block. After the ads, there's the Happy New Year spot, track 7. Every time there... You fell silent. The silence overwhelmed you. In that silence, you made your decision. This time, cancel the spot. Leave the mic open and keep talking. Tell people how you feel about Jake. Say everything you've kept to yourself. 2. Open the red folder. Mark's gaze drifted to the red folder on the table. The word Miller on it suddenly seemed darker than before. Jake's file, he said. I haven't touched it in years. We're in this situation because you haven't touched it, said Emily. There's a note in that file he recorded the night before you came. You never listened to it. Every time you said, I'm not ready, and put it on the shelf. Time breaks like this because of those who say, I'm not ready, Mark. Mark traced the edge of the file with his fingers. How do you know this? Before Emily could answer, there was a brief crackle. Other sounds seemed to intrude. A distant, muffled male voice, which for a moment said Mark's name, then faded away. I know about the note because we found that file in 2030, Emily said. In the archive room, before the building collapsed. But you were already dead. We listened to the recording that day. Me, my mum, and an old man we weren't sure who he was. Maybe it was you from the future. I don't know. We all listened together. In that note, Jake makes a confession before getting on the elevator. He says what happened that night wasn't your fault. At least, not the way you thought. Mark's heart raced. I don't understand. You will soon, Emily said. Please open the red folder. 11:54 p.m. The studio's program automation system opened a small window on the right screen. It read, Commercial break, 11:55:00. Next to it, a countdown bar filled up. Mark's hand had finally reached the point of decision. The red folder's lock was nothing more than a flimsy plastic latch. He took a deep breath and pulled the latch. The folder opened with the weary rustle of the papers inside. Police reports, old program schedules, accident photos. At the bottom, there was a small black USB drive and a yellow note taped to it. Mark, if you're listening to this, J.M. When he picked up the USB drive, his fingers tingled. Emily's voice had turned into a whisper in his earpiece. The commercials are coming, she said. You can't listen now. But I already know you always leave the studio during the commercials. Don't leave this time. At 11:55 p.m., the automation system automatically aired the commercials. The jingle played, then the pre-recorded ads began airing in a continuous block. Another voice, another world was speaking in their place. Mark plugged the USB into the port next to the computer. A new file appeared on the screen. Jake_note_31_12_2018.wav. Just as he was about to click on the file, he saw his reflection in the studio glass. A middle-aged man, sleepless, with dark circles under his eyes. In the reflection, there was nothing behind him. Just equipment, lights, and a dim city panorama. But for a moment, just a fleeting moment, he could have sworn he saw a second reflection behind him. Broad shoulders, a face caught between a smile and a serious expression. Jake's face. When he closed and opened his eyes, the reflection was gone. Emily's voice rose again, like a chorus of waiting breaths. "Don't go, Mark." Mark knew half the commercial break was over. The commercial blocks were 3 minutes total. 2 minutes must have already passed. Time was no longer just a number. It had seeped into the very air inside the studio. He pressed play. In his earpiece, there was a click, followed by a familiar breath. Then a laugh. Light, confident, slightly mocking. Jake Miller's laugh. "Mark, if you're hearing this, chances are there's been some drama, right? I know you—" The voice paused for a moment, then grew serious. "We had a stupid fight tonight. You said, 'I can do it without you.' I said, 'You can't do anything on your own anyway.' We were both right. Forget that part. But I need to confess something. Actually, 2 things." Mark's throat tightened. His fingers dug into the table. 1. This sponsorship thing. Yes, management talked to me separately. They said, "Mark is worn out. Let's put you forward." I agreed at first. Then I thought about it. You set up the program, you shoot the night. I sleep in the mornings. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid. That's why the fight dragged on. I'm sorry, buddy. A short pause, then the second sentence. 2. The elevator. You know, they say it's been closed for maintenance for 3 days, but I don't trust it. Last night I talked to one of the technicians. He said, "Don't get in without changing that cable. It's still faulty." Still, I'm craving a cigarette, and sometimes I'm too careless. If something happens to me while going up or down in the middle of the night, it's not your fault. The only thing you can do is tell people the truth. You're good at that. Maybe it's the only thing you're good at. Jake let out a short laugh, then his voice softened. Joking aside, Mark, I don't want to leave you alone with this microphone. But life is absurd. People fall. People disappear. If anything happens to me, don't destroy yourself. You can hate me, I can make mistakes, but you dying here alone at midnight, that's beyond even my sense of humor. Don't put down the microphone. Don't turn it off. Don't turn yourself off. The recording ended with a few seconds of silence. Then, the studio's air conditioning and the explosion sounds from outside returned. Mark slowly removed his headphones and placed them on the table. His eyes were burning. This note had been waiting for years, just under the table, inside a plastic folder. For years, while the guilt that consumed him grew, the words that could have eased it were only 30 centimeters away. 11:58 p.m. The automation software announced, "Ad block complete." On a panel, the name of the next track flashed. Track 7, Happy New Year Spot. The system began counting down. 5, 4, 3. Every year at this point, Mark wouldn't touch anything. The spot would come on, the studio would fill with a minute of pre-recorded audio, and he would take off his headphones, open the drawer, and pick up the gun. Emily's voice kicked in, like a metallic nail being hammered into his mind. "Now, Mark, now you're going to change it. Cancel track 7. Leave the microphone open." Mark looked at the USB drive still trembling in his hand. Then he reached for the screen. He clicked the small square next to track 7 and disabled it. The system gave a short warning sound, then fell silent. The microphone's on button turned red. "Sleepless City," Mark said, his voice cracking at first. "We're still here. I canceled the automatic spot that comes on after the commercials. Because right now, I can't handle anything automatic." He heard his own voice, more raw and vulnerable than he'd ever heard it in years. "I don't normally do this," he continued. "I don't usually talk about myself this much on air. But tonight I have a listener. Her name is Emily. She told me that somewhere in the future, this broadcast would be listened to as some kind of final recording. I know it sounds crazy. Maybe it is. But tonight, as you all know very well, the line between madness and sanity, especially when you look at the clock, is very thin." He took a short breath. "Do you remember Jake Miller?" he asked. "Many of you listened to the show we did together. Some of you remember that New Year's Eve. I hate remembering it. Because we argued that night. He got into the elevator. He went down. He never came back. The police said it was an accident. I said it was my fault. I've been saying that for 7 years. Every time the red light comes on in this studio, every night, the same words echo in my head. It's your fault."
"Just now I found a file under my desk. A file I hadn't opened in years."
Inside was a note Jake had hidden from me and then recorded for me to listen to. It said, "If anything happens to me in the elevator, it's not your fault, Mark. I'm too careless. That's the truth." He paused for a moment, tapping his fingers on the desk. "You decide," he said. "You choose which story to believe." For 7 years, I chose the version where I killed myself. No one insisted. I chose it. Because guilt felt more familiar than salvation. And what's familiar always feels safer. It was 11:59 p.m. Outside the studio, the sounds of fireworks from the city were already growing louder. In the distance, a fading song, shouts of celebration, but the studio still maintained that aquarium-like silence. Only Mark's voice and Emily's breathing could be heard. Emily whispered, "Look in the drawer if you want, but don't put your hand inside." Knowing the microphone was on, Mark slowly pulled the drawer open. Inside, covered in years of dust, lay a black pistol. Next to it, a single rusted bullet. The listeners couldn't see this scene, but Mark could almost hear their breath. "Yes," he said. "It's here. It's been here for years. That's it. I acted as if this drawer was the only line between us. Either this drawer or nothing. But today, someone's voice showed me another line. Maybe just the line of the microphone." He pulled his hand out of the drawer and closed it. The click echoed in his ear like a small closing. 23:59:40. "Emily?" Emily's voice came a moment late, as if the distance between them had suddenly stretched a few more years. "I'm here," she said. "Will you be able to hear me afterwards?" A brief silence, then a slightly smiling tone. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe this conversation is only for you. Maybe time only bends and twists because you decide it does. Maybe there won't be anyone called me in 2030. But at least there's a record now. You closed the drawer. That's a start." On the studio's digital clock, the red numbers flickered toward 00:00. 00:00. 00:00. The city exploded with screams, explosions, sirens, and horns. Behind the windows, the new year fell like a stone onto the old year. Mark breathed in, with no jingle, no prepared spot, just his own voice. "Sleepless City," he said. "We're still here. I'm Mark Lewis. For the first time, I'm actually awake for the new year. If you can hear me, close your drawer too. That's enough for today." He didn't turn down the microphone. For a while, only the sounds of the city, the faint hum of the studio, and a single distant firework explosion could be heard. Then, suddenly, a metallic sound rang out in his earpiece. Emily. "Times are changing," she whispered. "The recording, it's different. This time, you're continuing. This voice, the first voice of the year. You didn't stop for the first time." Her voice was trembling. It was as if someone was pulling her away from where she was. "Dad." That word stabbed Mark in the heart. It was the first time he had heard her address him that way. "If I really exist somewhere, thank you. Even if I don't, thank you. A world where you didn't kill yourself deserves to exist. Maybe I'll be there. Maybe I won't. But you..." The sentence was left unfinished. There was even a sudden static crackle, as if a cable had been pulled, a plug pulled from an outlet. Then silence. Mark sat for a few seconds without saying anything. He took off his headphones and looked around. The studio was still the same. The posters, the screens, the red folder, the darkness inside the drawer. But something was different. Inside him, alongside the heavy, sharp guilt he had grown so accustomed to, there was another feeling, new and unfamiliar. Emptiness. A space that had emerged with the withdrawal of guilt. A space that had yet to be filled with anything. Perhaps this emptiness was frightening. Perhaps saying, "You're guilty," was easier than saying, "I don't know what to do anymore." But this emptiness, at least it was open to life. The next morning, when the station's day crew entered the studio, Mark was still sitting at his desk. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse, but he was alive. The director, half angry, half confused, checked the recording of the broadcast. In the segment from 11:45 p.m. to 12:10 a.m., the system reports showed something strange. The input-output levels were normal, but the caller ID hadn't recorded any numbers. The automation noted that track 7 had been manually cancelled at 11:59 p.m., but there was no active connection on the phone line used. One of the technical crew raised an eyebrow. "It sounds like he's talking to someone here," he said. "He keeps saying, 'Emily,' but there's no line, no voice recorded on the other end, only Mark's voice." The director looked at the screen for a moment, then shrugged. "Late night TV," he said. "Viewers expect strange things. The important thing is this. The man has left his gun in the drawer. That alone is good enough news." Behind the studio window, the city was tired but awake on the first day of the new year. Somewhere, a young woman, whose existence was still uncertain, would perhaps snooze her alarm, perhaps never wake up. Perhaps, years later, she would accidentally open an old recording and hear a voice claiming to be her father, a voice that once fought for her. That afternoon, Mark picked up a coffee cup and stood in front of the studio window. He watched the street below, the people, those running, those stopping to smoke. When he reached into his pocket, his fingers touched a small piece of paper. He pulled it out, a post-it note. On it was a short sentence written in his own handwriting. He couldn't remember when he had written it. This year, change the question. He turned it over. It was blank. Mark stuck the post-it note on the edge of the console, where he could see it. Before turning on the microphone, he whispered silently to himself, "Okay, Emily, I changed the question. Let's see what the answer will be." This time, the first word of the new year was not a curse, but a possibility. And possibilities, even if they were the most frightening thing at night, were also the only way out.